Hi, everybody. This is Ann Patchett at Parnassus Books. Thank you for listening to Parnassus Presents. Your support allows us to keep bringing you fantastic events. So please consider purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book at the link below. We hope you enjoy the event, recorded live from the Parnassus stage.
All right. I'm Elise. I'm the director of events here at Parnassus Books. So I get to say welcome and thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for shopping local. Thank you for supporting the bookstore. And the reason why we can do this is because you're here. So thank you. Somebody asked me just this evening what one of my favorite books of the year is, and it is this. It is such an incredible book. So I really encourage you to buy one for yourself and one for your best friend, or if you have 5 best friends. So The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. Kiran Desai, who is absolutely lovely. She signed 2,000 books today because she is our First Editions Club selection this month. So she's been busy. She's a best-selling and award-winning author, and the awards include the Man Booker Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Fiction Award for her novel, The Inheritance of Loss, and I encourage you to read that as well if you haven't. She's also been listed as one of the 20 most influential global Indian women, and tonight she's here in conversation with New York Times best-selling, award-winning author and owner of Parnassus Books, Ann Patchett. So let's just get them out here. Kiran Desai and Ann Patchett.
Hi. This is my new best friend, Kiran Desai. And boy, you worked hard today.
Oh, I'm so grateful.
Where did you wake up?
Where did I wake up? I woke up in Oxford, Mississippi at 4 a.m. And I took the flight from Tupelo, a direct flight from Tupelo to Nashville. Yeah.
And then came right over to what we call the Ship Shack, where we signed these things, and she signed 2,000 books.
Yeah.
While
No, I'm
Nemo
very grateful
watched,
for
and they
that.
got so attached to each other that she
Oh.
invited him to come to the event.
Look at him.
tonight.
And I guess he has a new haircut.
Yes,
for this evening.
In between, got a new haircut. So
Mm.
if we're boring, you just can
the
play with
dog.
the dog. It'll be great. All right. I want to ask you one of my favorite questions that I don't bust out all that often, which is give us an overview of your life. Give us a biography of yourself. Anything you want to tell us. And as I said to you earlier, some people answer this question in 2 minutes, and some people it's the entire hour. And either way is fine. But I want to know about you.
I think it may be a long answer, actually.
That's good. I love that.
Because when, quite recently after I finished this book, after many years of working on it, I treated myself to reading Garcia Marquez's memoir. And I think he planned for it to be 3 volumes, but then he only managed to finish one, Living to Tell the Tale. And it is so beautiful because you just see where his fiction came from. And it's it's like entering the world of 100 Years of Solitude. And you're right back in that amazing world of, the banana plantation, and Arakataka. I remember this beautiful passages, and the memoir really talks about how his inspiration came from his grandparents' landscape, and when, as a young journalist, he returned to his childhood home, his grandparents' home, he understood. He finally really realized how he could write his novels. That was the breakthrough of returning to that landscape and finding that was where he could work from. And I think something like that happened with me because I never imagined that the landscapes of my grandparents would mean so much to me, and that I would work out of them so deeply. And I didn't actually know them so well, but their stories are fascinating, and perhaps the mystery of their lives has, inspired me as a writer and has kept me. Sometimes I think one becomes a writer because of stories that happened long before one was born. And on my father's side, his parents came from Gujarat on the west coast. Very traditional, not a wealthy family at all. My grandfather studied English sitting under the street lamp. And he learned the whole English dictionary by heart. That's the family legend anyway. And passed the exam held by the local Maharaja. So the local Maharaja was giving away scholarships to worthy children to study abroad. And he went to England and passed the exam for the Indian Civil Service, this was British India. And if you managed to pass that exam, that was a breakthrough to a completely different class. I mean, this was a ruling class of India. And he studied in Cambridge and would tell me...
Was this the grandfather in
Yes,
the
in Inheritance of Loss. I used him.
I'm
Not exactly.
And thinking, wait, I've read this story.
Yes, just like the Marquez grandparents.
Is he that awful?
No, so that was the fiction part of it. He was not that awful, but he was completely mysterious. So he did have a face like a mask. So you couldn't tell what he was thinking, except for that you knew the journey had been so long and so hard that he'd probably given up everything to become the person that he had become. He gave up class, community, religion, his family, moved to another part of India, learned how to eat with a knife and fork, learned how to go hunting, how to sit on a horse, how to go to the club. And he was married to my grandmother when she was 13, and she was his second wife. The first one had died when much younger. It's a time of a lot of infant mortality. And she never really learned English. She spoke Gujarati and some Hindi. But she also had to learn how to go to the club and how to sit at the table. And so there was this huge transformation. And, I just, only as an adult did I realize that they must have, given up all of that very deliberately in order to belong to a bigger idea of India. You're sort of giving up that village landscape for an idea of a secular democracy, and to belong so that everybody could belong. And they were, that India, these strictures of caste especially and religion were loosened. So it was there's such intelligence behind that.
What year are we talking about?
This was, this would have been it would have been 1920s. My mother was born in 1937. So this would have been...
So was mine.
Really? Yeah. So fascinating. And so, but this would have been before the 1920s, because it would have been 1910s, and the British left India in 1947. But, so all of those, that was one side of the family. And my grandmother really never read much. I think the only book she ever read was Gandhi's autobiography. And she always said it was the best book she'd ever read. But it was an old bungalow. They lived in an old bungalow in a town called Allahabad. And that's where this book begins, The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. And I think how strange it is that here I am in the United States, and when I begin a book, I go back to that veranda of my childhood where my grandparents would sit out every day, and the first conversation of the day at dawn, when the crows were beginning to caw, they would be drinking their morning tea. The first conversation of the day would be, what are we going to eat for the rest of the day? And a long, long deliberation would ensue, and quite a hilarious conversation. Lots of arguments and discussions, and the cook would be sent to the market directly after breakfast. So I returned to that landscape, but also my mother's side was another kind of fascinating story, and I never knew her parents at all. My maternal grandmother died when I was a baby, and my maternal grandfather died before I was born, long when my mother was quite young. But he was from what is now Bangladesh, and he came from a family that was fighting for independence, was very anti-British. And so instead of being sent to England to study the way that was normal, and he came from a sort of landowning family, he was sent to Germany to study. Yeah, and this was common. In fact, there was a whole group of Indian students in Germany at that time in the 1920s. And when he was studying engineering in Berlin, and when he was walking down the street one day, he was stopped by a sculptor called Georg Kolbe, who asked if he could sculpt his face. And I think he was a foreign student, probably a poor foreign student, and needed to make money, and he did. And this Kolbe sculpted what he called the head of a young Indian and a torso also of my grandfather, and introduced him to my grandmother, who was a newspaper editor's daughter. And I think it's just extraordinary that they could marry in Berlin in the 1920s without any complaint from either family. And a sari was sent from Bangladesh, from Bengal to Berlin. It was a mauve-colored sari, and it was made into a dress for my grandmother. She wore that was her wedding dress. And then she sailed to India with a trunk full of Goethe and Schiller and her china. And then, of course, the war broke out. And India was fighting Germany alongside the British. So, a lot of families were caught up in a very strange situation, because you could have one family member who was in the army, and you could have another who was, was in the army fighting Germany along with the British, and you would also have another family member who might be in prison, fighting for independence from the British. And so my mother describes this extraordinary childhood. She lived through the partition of India, and remembers, waking up and finding her Muslim neighbors, had vanished overnight, had left for Pakistan overnight. So this drastic change in the country.
What language did your mother grow up speaking? What was the language in that house?
German, Bengali, and English and Hindi. Yeah, so her first language, I think, was German, weirdly enough. And then, because both parents lost their language, one lost Bengali and one lost German, because they were living in Delhi, where the language was Hindi and English. Amazing, no? It really is. So, and Georg Kolbe, by the way, the sculptor, he was interested in race, so he'd also sculpted head of a young Japanese and head of a young African, and among the many things he sculpted were also the sort of Aryan nymphs that the Nazis used and exhibited. And yet he was friends with my grandparents. He'd introduced them, so it was quite interesting to see how an artist gets caught up, in these extreme situations, and how different people respond, which is something I think we all have to think about today. It's quite fascinating. But therefore, I grew up with my mother's bookshelves that were so international. And she said she had, she grew up with both the European tradition and the Indian, and I think I inherited that from her. But our lives in India was so sort of sleepy when I was small, because after Indian independence, I think India really shut its doors to the wider world. It was a very protected market. I think there was just a feeling that the experiment had gone so wrong that for a long, long while, India only opened up to the larger world, I think in the late 1980s, when American companies started doing business in India again. But when I was growing up, we didn't see foreign films. I grew up early years without television. There was no television. Hi, Nemo. Oh. So all we had from the outside world were really books. That was how the world arrived. And now when I look back, I feel as if we were reading as if we were in exile. You know, we were reading so deeply and so passionately. And I did not realize until I'd left India that even though that was such a quiet childhood, there were 4 of us, and my mother would, it's amazing to me that she nurtured this desire to be a writer in that landscape and would shut herself in to her room and work through the mornings, and as one of the early novelists in India writing in English. It's quite remarkable, I think. But I had not realized that something very old between India and the rest of the world was still sort of moving us along, and that it was in fact quite natural that we should leave, and that so many Indians continue to migrate and leave, because I grew up in a very westernized environment, and so in a way I was also brought up to leave, and it was the door opened, I think because my mother was a writer, and her publishers would come to visit us, and her translators would come, and one day I think the door opened, and one day she stepped through it, and took me with her because I was the youngest child. And so we went to England for a year, and then we came to the States when I was 16, and I went to high school in Amherst, Massachusetts, in the local high school there.
What about your sister and father?
I have 2 brothers too.
Oh.
Yeah. They were older, quite a bit older. So they'd already left. My brothers had left the house. My sister returned and was staying with my father. So my mother was teaching 1 semester in Smith and Mount Holyoke, and then going back for the rest of the year. So when I was studying, when I went to undergraduate college in Vermont, I was often alone for the summer and winter breaks, which is where this book also begins, in the library in Bennington College in the snowscape, where I was very painfully lonely, but also my first experience of real exquisite artistic loneliness. It was also where I started to write. And there's nothing more lovely than sitting in a quiet library when it's snowing outside and working and reading, 100 Years of Solitude and Anna Karenina and all of those books. That's the story.
That's a beautiful, beautiful story. And be sure that you read Inheritance of Loss if you haven't already, because both of these books fit into that narrative that you just told us.
Yeah, it does, because I think I constructed Inheritance of Loss by drawing on my father's father, on his journey, because he became a judge eventually, and was a judge under the British, so dispensing very unfair and unjust colonial law, and then eventually a judge in a free, independent India. So I drew on that journey, and then I sort of looked for links between that old colonial journey to this our modern system of immigration. Tried to look for echoes between those two, to try to see how different they were. What were the echoes between these two different time periods? Have things changed all that much? The power divide between nations is still so great. So what does it do to anybody who's making that journey?
This book, rumor has it, that you worked on it for 20 years, and that at one point it got up to 5,000 pages.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes, it's true. I think I was just building up material. So I was, not necessarily for this book alone, but I was just writing journals, diaries, following my thoughts, following every story that came to my mind. And really, I think I was describing it yesterday in Oxford, Mississippi, just saying that I was working like an ant or a bee or an earthworm, and I was really transposing like one little molecule of real life into artistic life, one little bit of what I was experiencing into the pages of of my notebook. And then at some point I was in a writer's residency, and I went to the printing room and printed out the document that I had, and it came to 5,000 pages.
And they sent you a bill.
They were so shocked, and I was so shocked, and I had to mail that huge pile of paper back
Oh my God.
in an enormous box. Yeah.
Will any of those 4,000 plus pages find the light of day in some other way?
I hope so, because I cut out a lot of storylines. One of them being this one of Germany, because you cannot write about Germany in the 1920s and 1930s and not have it be the center. It's just too important a subject. It doesn't fit on the side. But it was very interesting to me, because when I was trying to think about the rise of nationalism in India right now, and I thought that old current has, never went away. That's something of it remained underground. Those links remained, and they've come bursting out now. It's very interesting to me.
In India, but also
Yes, also all over the place.
everywhere else as well.
All over the place.
My mind is just going in a million different directions, but let's stay here
Yes.
for a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you look back over all that time and all that writing with this wonderful, perfect novel finished, how does it feel? I mean, how do you look back on all that time? Do you feel like that is the only way that?
I feel the same way as when I looked at those 5,000 pages. I feel a bit terrified that it took me 20 years. I feel as if I was in a real time warp. It's quite, but I didn't notice the years. I didn't notice the years, passing, except for, I think, on my birthday. And it was always a very depressing day, because I realized another year had gone by and I hadn't finished my novel. Yeah. But thank goodness it's finished.
Was it always a novel about Sonia and Sunny?
No, I suppose it was. I was writing all the stories of all these different characters, and then reading through all of those thousands of pages, realized I could construct it around Sonia and Sunny, and then talk about how all the different love stories around them influence their own. So the stories of the grandparents and of Sonia's parents and Sunny's parents and of their friends, and sort of try to paint a picture of how these love stories have changed through time, because at the time of the grandparents, an Indian love story would have been set in one community, one religion, one class, most likely one place. But in today's world, out in the modern world, it can go in so many different directions. And Sonia and Sunny keep asking each other, why? Asking themselves, why this person? Why not someone else? Why this place? Why not another? And as they're sort of modern cosmopolitan Indians, and they're out in the big world, and as they are traveling and experiencing different things, their own sense of self is turning more and more fluid at the very time they're trying to find a sense of belonging. So as I was following their story and extending it into the grandparents, into the past, all the way to their grandparents' time, and extending it geographically, I realized that I didn't have to just hold it to romantic loneliness to keep the story to that, but I could look at all the different divides of the world today, the class divide, the sort of distrust between races, and the rage between nations, all of these different divides as a kind of loneliness. And so I began to construct the book that way as well.
It's so interesting. You just kind of seamlessly switch from talking about love to talking about loneliness.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm not quite sure what came first, whether I wanted to write a book about global loneliness or if I wanted to write a love story, because probably both things, because it does go back to those days in the library when I was reading reading Love in the Time of Cholera, Unbearable Lightness of Being, Anna Karenina, Snow Country, all of these stories. And I think as a writer, I don't know if you agree, Anne, that sometimes you write a book just because you want to put it on the shelf next to the books you love.
I haven't thought about that, but that's a beautiful
Mm.
thought. Have you gone back and reread Unbearable Lightness of Being or 100 Years of Solitude
I reread
or Love in the Time
recently.
of Cholera?
I did Love in the Time of Cholera, and somehow Snow Country by Kawabata was an interesting book for me to read, because it is about love, but it is also about a huge class divide and this sort of what you call him, this sort of rather fake person coming from the city, very westernized, and goes. I think the opening line is the train came out, came through the tunnel and came out into the snow country. So it's sort of going into a kind of past Japan and into rural Japan, and it's about the great divide between these two places and these characters. But what interested me is that it's also a very Asian novel, and it's constructed. When Kawabata spoke about it in his Nobel Prize-winning speech, he said he was so influenced by haiku and the principles of haiku when he was writing that book. So it's a very Asian novel, and it's really constructed around the empty space and the mystery. There are mysteries that at the center of the book that are never, you never know the exact relationships between some of the characters. So the mystery is that empty space. It sort of divides the characters, but also holds the book together. That was interesting to me.
I read Snow Country when I was in college,
Yeah.
and I'm so interested in going back and rereading some of these books because sometimes they don't hold up,
Yes.
and sometimes they do
Sometimes they really do.
beautifully.
I was reading Kafka also and thinking about that estrangement, that quality of estrangement that also was important to this book. I was reading Naipaul, Enigma of Arrival, a lot of books about characters coming upon this sort of emptiness or this unknowingness. But somehow it's quite spooky. You find the books you need on the shelf, and you don't know quite why you've picked them up, and then they turn out to be the exact right books. Those are the books you need. And a lot of these books had snow in them too. There was so much snow in the Snow Country, Enigma of Arrival too. He sees the landscape sort of becomes this white space, and this Indian immigrant, he's from Trinidad, goes to what he thinks is going to be the center, which is, he's travels to London thinking that from Trinidad colonial background, he's going to the center of all things, and finds that Britain is sort of unraveling. It's post-war Britain. It's not at all it's not at all the center anymore. And how he learns his language. But there's snow in that book. And then in Kafka's The Castle, the traveler is at the bottom of the bridge. He's looking up, and there's this castle, and it's a swirl of snow. I was thinking how strange. And then my book was full of snow too.
Snow.
In
really
Vermont.
beautiful, really beautiful snow.
Look, Nemo's gone to sleep.
We've bored him.
Bored him.
We've bored him. It's come to this. Now my head is full of snow. Okay, let's talk about editing, because that's definitely one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And I just want to say, for those of you who were here several weeks ago when my friend Patrick Ryan was here, and we really talked about Robin Desser, and I was saying then I got to the end of this book and Kiran thanks Robin Desser, and I just thought, what are the chances that really my two favorite books of the year were both edited by the same person. But then you went on to tell me that basically all of my favorite books were edited by Robin Desser.
It's extraordinary.
And I just never knew.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. She's, I think, just recently retired. She edited Jhumpa Lahiri, I think also Arundhati Roy, Chimamanda Adichie. Who else?
Nell Freudenberger.
Nell Freudenberger, Edwidge Danticat.
Yes.
It's amazing.
So,
Yes.
so tell us about your experience with working with Robin,
Robin.
because we did talk about it a lot, and it
Yeah.
was so
And
fascinating.
it's so interesting, that writer-editor relationship. I had to write something for Robin. She was getting a prize.
I'm
some
glad
point,
she
yes.
was getting a prize.
And
She deserves
Mm.
one. Yes.
and her writers were asked to, just write what she meant to them. And I wrote and said that once I had the great pleasure of writing briefly in a jungle where there was a toucan who came every day and watched me while I was writing. I would sit and work at the desk outside.
Seriously?
Yeah, and it came every day to the same tree, and its eye was on me all the time, and to look. And then at night it would fly off, such a beautiful into the foliage at night, and in the morning it would be back there with its eye, and a kind of quizzical look. And I wrote and said that was like working with Robin. That was like her eye on me was that kind of quizzical eye, and it was to have your work held in the gaze of a wonderful editor is extreme fortune. So yes, she was my editor when I had no idea what I was doing and where the book would go.
But you had already sold it.
Yes, so yes. Yes.
How long
And
did you...
she never said, Kiran,
It's time.
it's time, you better figure out what you're doing. No, she never did that. So she helped me, I think, figure out the story. And the book went to places it would not have gone without Robin. For example, Sonia's profession, Sonia and Sunny. And Sunny is an aspiring journalist, quite, he's disconcerted by the way the news changes form and the way it morphs from country to country, the way the news is reported in completely different ways. And Sonia is an aspiring novelist, and I was thinking of Marquez again, who said in this memoir I like so much that journalism and fiction are two wings of the same bird. But it was Robin who made me go there, because earlier it was just a love story, and she said, but what are they doing, Kiran? Like, what's their profession? And I always think, oh no, as a novelist, like, they have to have professions. Your characters have to do something.
I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Mm.
What are they going to do?
Yes.
How
and
do
then
they have
you have
health
to have
insurance?
expertise. Yes.
Yes.
And how do they earn a living? And then you have, as a writer, you have to have some expertise in what your characters are doing too.
Well, and also they have to worry about visas.
Yes.
I mean, that comes up more and more. Can they
Yes.
stay? What country can they stay?
Yes.
Sonia gets on the wrong side of the door,
Yes.
and then she can't
she
get
can't
to
get
Sunny.
back. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, those are huge questions too. And you also have to figure that out, and you also have to figure out seasons and years and times and put it all together on the surface. But then it has to deeply work in that shadow territory as well, where the deeper themes of the book have to go together as well, and then the top has to go together. So you have to have a good editor is everything, when you yourself can't see where you're going.
If you work on something for that long, how do you know it's done?
I don't know that it's done. I mean, I think it's one version of the book, and that it could take so many other forms. And I mean, even today, when I was getting ready to come here, I thought I should have taken that bit. Yeah, that I think, I didn't do that right, because you extend a story to us in a certain way, and then you don't know whether you want to pull it back a little bit. If you've been too subtle, or if you've been too unsubtle, or exactly what form you should take. And the only way you know is if you let some time pass and you read the whole manuscript again. And then you make another change, and then again you have to wait, and then you read the whole thing again to see if the rhythm is still, if it works the new way around, and if the rhythm still holds together, and if the mood of the book still shifts in the right place. So it's an endless thing. But yeah, it's just one version, and I'm still tormented by another version it could have taken.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I lie awake at night. And
Oh, you shouldn't, because it's perfect. And I really do think that a work of art is something that knows when to stop and has its own life and its own energy.
How do you decide, Anne, then, when you're writing something? How do you know when it's done?
I studied art in college and in graduate school. And the knowledge that you can ruin a painting or a drawing is something that they teach you endlessly in art school, and they never teach you when you write. Because there's always this idea of, oh, I'll change everything and then I'll just go 3 drafts back on my computer and it'll be fine. I can undo it. But it's not true. You can kill something.
Yes.
And so for me, I never believe that it's perfect. It's a percentage thing. And you get to the point where you just think, I've got to take my hand off of it, or I could go too far and ruin it.
Like sometimes I think that, I do think that, if I do this now, that'll create another problem, that the story gets to a place where it's, it's linked in such a way that changing something will cause a problem somewhere else.
Sure.
At a certain point.
It's like a tapestry.
Yeah.
You can't just pick at the threads or the whole thing will fall on the floor.
Yes. But still, also a love story, by the way, is challenging to write. I found it very hard and kind of embarrassing to say. And I only learned to say it recently, because at first I couldn't say I had written a love story at all. And I went to this convention for librarians, and there were several romance writers who had no problem at all. So I was sort of learning from them. But a literary love story, I almost, you also think, how should you end it? Should you end it more? Should it be more ambivalent? Should it end happily? I mean, these are also questions I had in my mind.
But don't you think that that's what the world needs? Which maybe is the segue into what literary responsibility is. What is literary responsibility, Kiran? Tell me.
I don't know. I mean, it's such a... I attended a PEN. The PEN is the organization that stands up for writers in prison. I think they also speak for journalists sometimes, but journalists have their own organization. It's mainly for fiction writers, poets. And, it was... and I think the question really was about authoritarianism, and all the writers were speaking in these different directions. And then one young writer put up her hand, and she said, you're all saying you should say this and you should do that and you should fight. And she said, but I'm scared because I'll be thrown into prison.
There you go.
And that's what I think when I look at what happened in India in the last decade and what's happening here now. And I saw how when fear enters a country, just as when it enters a family, it's almost the end of everything. And fear is a lot in this book, actually. There's a lot, the theme of the fear in the personal sphere and in the political, when shame and fear enter a country. But fear is, once people are too scared to speak out, you're in a very bad way. And if you're not, and once writers are being thrown into prison, which is now happening in India, has been happening for a while. Look at what's happening here, because books are being taken off shelves, which is one way of silencing a writer. But the next step is imprisoning writers. And you would think, somebody said to me, she said, how do we warn Americans? Because when you come from another country, it can happen. You've seen it happen. But in this country, they don't think it's going to happen, and it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Any idea what we should do?
I think we have to speak up. No?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we cannot be afraid. Yeah. And then you see the result of, look at the cost some people have paid. Like, look at, Salman Rushdie. Look at the kind of cost he's paid for his fiction.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
What do
Boy,
you think?
that-
What are your thoughts, Anne?
that
It's
just
so-
took us straight down. But I guess what I want to say
Yeah.
in the face of all of that, because you really are talking about all of these important issues of displacement and nationalism and always feeling like you're in the wrong place. Both Sonia and Sunny always feeling that if they're in India, they're too American. If they're in America, they're too Indian. They're always in the wrong spot. But then to frame all of that around love seems incredible and brave and important.
Well, I will say that, in terms of what writers can do, is that I think also we do have to remember that we actually read for pleasure and we read for beauty, and that beauty saves us. And, it really does. So I do think we have to keep on making beautiful art. Yeah.
I really agree. And I also think the world is full of dystopian novels about the
Yes.
horrors of novels about the horrors of climate change and all of the
Yes.
terrible political things that are coming down the road. And I think at this point to write literary fiction that acknowledges that but also has the beauty and also lifts us up is important.
Yeah. Yes. I agree.
I should let you guys ask some questions because
It's such
I'm
a
looking
beautiful
at a clock.
bookshop. Because I watch all your Instagram things, I feel
You're on the set
as
now.
I'm in such a familiar place. Yeah, it's so lovely.
Thank you. We love it. Are there questions?
Nemo, I'm so happy to have a dog here.
Oh, yes. Good. Here, we have one. Thank you. Yes, just throw in the microphone.
Did your editor get the whole 5,000 pages? Did she start with that and start whittling it down the way
No,
they had to?
I was
for
not so
some
cruel.
other authors?
no, I think she got the 1,000 page manuscript. I worked for many years on my own. For a long time, I wasn't showing it to editors for years at a time.
Other questions? Yes. This is how Elise gets her steps in.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the significance of the cover, the moon phases.
Oh, what a lovely question. So we were
So
searching and
beautiful.
searching for the right cover. And the image is painted by a friend of mine, these moons. And her name she's a wonderful painter called Olivia Fraser. And she is the wife of the historian William Dalrymple, who has a podcast called Empire. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. But both of them have, I think they're both Scottish, but they have a family background in India, on both sides, and they live there now. And he's been writing about India for many years now, and he runs the Jaipur Book Festival, which is one of the biggest book festivals in the world in terms of the number of people who attend. And it's crazy. I think every day they get about 500,000 people. Isn't that incredible? Millions and millions and millions of people have gone to that book festival. It's very
I don't
moving.
Even know, I had no idea. I just did the Woody Point Book Festival in Newfoundland where they had 200 people every day.
Well,
No joke. They had one venue. It held 200 people. That was it.
so funny. Yeah. But this festival is very moving because you see school children come. It's free. So it's open to everybody. And book clubs and kids come. And he started that in India. It's just amazing. So I was talking about the images. And so his wife studied with Indian miniature painters and uses those techniques. So she works with those brushes that just have, sometimes just a few. I don't think it's one. They sometimes say it's one hair of a squirrel or something like that. But I think it's a few hairs of a squirrel. But but it's so slow and so meditative a process, and very spiritual in its thinking, very mystical. And so she paints, so she's using the techniques, but she paints on a much larger scale. So these are her images, but the book has two artists in the book, and one of them is a very mystical painter, the kind of painter who came to India in the old days, searching, European painters who came searching for something. They didn't know what they were searching for unless they found it. And that was based a little bit on a painter I know called Francesco Clemente. He's an Italian painter, fantastic painter, who went to India in the 1970s and then came to New York, where at the same time as Andy Warhol and Basquiat and painters like that. But his work is deeply rooted in Indian mysticism. And I was thinking about it when you were saying the characters are caught between different worlds and constantly transforming into different, sort of unknowable creatures out of themselves. There's a strong theme of mysticism in the book and of the unseen world. And so there's a Francesco Clemente painting in this book that I describe as the heart of a book. It's a little mystical figure. But that's why I think I also was drawn to these images and these moons. Yeah.
What about the amulet?
The amulet is the Francesco Clemente painting.
Okay.
Yes, it's a little demon figure. You don't know whether it's a demon or a god, and it has no face and no eyes. So it's like the little deity of the book, because the book is also structured according to who is captured by whose gaze, who is in whose purview when it comes to nations or the news or to art, all these different things. Yeah,
the book
there's
is
a lot of
also
painting.
wonderfully philosophical. There were so many, like on every page, there was a sentence that I wanted to underline or write down and thought, I would just like to take that sentence out and think about it for a week. It's such a good book. I really want to get that point across. Are there any other questions?
I'm sure there are writers in the room or writing people who
Raise your hand, whoever.
have craft questions.
I was wondering if you'd say something about the importance of the human senses in your book. I've read your prior book, and I was practically in that judge's house, that old house. I could smell the wet, and I could hear the creatures scuttering around at night. And that was so much a part of the inheritance of loss, was the loss and the decay of that house and the way the people in it experienced it. I was just wondering if you could say more about the importance of that sensory experience in your writing.
I think somehow the more, it's always the strangest thing that I tell this to my writing students whenever I teach, that the more detailed you get, weirdly, the more a reader identifies with the book. Even though it's very particular to a different culture, it still holds true. And I keep diaries and journals. And unfortunately, the last few years of working on this book, this last year, I wasn't keeping a journal, and I'm almost killing myself because I think I lost so much wonderful material and so many things were happening.
So interesting.
And especially I think I lost so much material thinking of the rise of nationalism in India and thinking just what people were saying and how this country also has been changing. But while I was working on The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, I have piles and piles and piles of diaries, and the diaries are actually the first draft of my novel as well. So as I was making very detailed notes about the place, I was also thinking of the book, and so the diaries sync together with the first manuscript in a way. And I then go back and I use those details to construct everything about the book. And I can see I've used different colored inks, and then I write, I can use this for Sonia and lift certain details of a house or a landscape from those pages. But one forgets so much if you don't. I think if you don't write it down immediately, it just goes. Those metaphors go, you know. I think of Kundera, who said a single metaphor can give rise to love. And you just think that every metaphor is so valuable. Every landscape description too. And also, one of the lonelinesses in this book is the past vanishing. You know, the generation of my parents and the country changes so much, and a book works like a museum in a way. It preserves certain things that are still so precious. Yeah, so it also became important to me to hold on to those things, and I knew that it would get harder and harder for me to reach back in time and remember those details. So I wanted to do that. I was still going back to India. My father was still alive while I was writing this book, and I thought, let me hold on to it while I can.
I heard a little piece of an interview on the radio today, and I have no idea who it was, but the writer was from Kerala and had left early and grew up in the States, and she was talking about going back and writing about her family and trying to capture that world. And she was thinking, nothing in this world exists that her grandparents would be able to recognize. But I was thinking, and when your grandparents were alive, there was nothing in that world that existed that their grandparents would recognize. We all think that this moment that we're living in is unique, but it just comes back over and over again. Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, you mean that? Oh,
what
I see what you're saying.
What we lose, they lost as well. They
Yes.
But maybe not. Maybe the world was so much more static.
I don't know. I mean, I think that
Really?
the world. Well, I think it was more. It seems to me as if there was a time when you were rooted in a place, and your family went back several generations in the same place, so that you were known. There was a certain sense of being known, and that perhaps is changing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the characters says that if you're not famous, you're nobody. I wonder if the fame culture of today has something to do with that.
And there's a line in this book in which you say that their parents' generation didn't even understand the concept of loneliness.
Yes. And I think that's still true for a lot of people in one way, because of course there's always the loneliness of being misunderstood or being trapped in a place, or longing to escape a situation. But certainly, practically speaking, yes, there were people, it's still now, I think that people who've never eaten a meal alone, which seems startling to me. Never eaten alone, never slept in a room alone. Just never had a single experience of waking up in a house alone, never being unknown. Yeah, so a totally different way of being. Imagine not having ever eaten a meal alone. That seems startling to me.
I mean, do you think that writers experience loneliness or being alone in such a different way than other people? I always feel like all I'm doing is trying to be alone. It's the single quest of my life.
Yeah, because so you can write.
Yes.
So you can
read.
Yes. Yes. Well, it is true. And I was listening to an old Edna O'Brien interview, because when she died, I wanted to go back and read some of her stories, which are so fantastic.
So
good.
Good.
She was so gorgeous with that deep, fantastic voice. And one of the things, I was watching old YouTube videos of Edna O'Brien, and she said, a writer has to be lonely. I think a writer has to be lonely. So yes, I mean, there's that artistic loneliness, which is really exquisite. And certainly when I'm alone writing, I'm so happy.
Right. I mean, I don't think I'm ever lonely. I don't know.
Who did I just... where I just saw this? Yesterday in Oxford, Mississippi, when I went to Faulkner's house. There was a little plaque over there with some of Faulkner's lines saying exactly this. And saying that a writer, the solitude of a writer, he's never lonely. He said his world is full of his characters. and populist characters, and it's that that the solitude is not loneliness. And I think a lot of the characters in my book sort of make that point, that loneliness is sometimes is sustenance. And it's sought out. Sonia's mother says to her, there are worse things than loneliness, and loneliness can be the peace that comes after the war is over, or it can be the absence of fear, or all kinds of different things. So it's not actually just painful loneliness in this book. And Albana from Albania, who's the bartender, and Sunny goes to drink in the bar after his girlfriend leaves him, and she says to him, she says, you have no idea, you have no idea what loneliness is. Loneliness is, she comes from Albania, and she's grown up, in a dictatorship, and she says loneliness is not being allowed your private thoughts, and of being under constant surveillance. And your loneliness is the incredible fortune of a lucky man in a country of plenty. So,
Well said. Well said, Albanian bartender. If there is another question, we'll take it, and if not, we'll wrap it up. What do you think? There is a question. See, there are always questions.
I'm interested in what comes next for you
that's
after the
too.
book tour, and I'm really interested in the 4,000 pages, and how you might see yourself returning to them.
thank you for that question, because of course now I feel so, I don't quite know what to do with myself now that I've finished the book. I mean, I'm glad I'm doing this book tour and I'm traveling, because otherwise I would be having a bit of a panic attack as to how to fill my time and be squirreling around for a new idea. But I think there are some strands of the story that in those 4,000 pages that I want to return to. One of the bits is this idea of this nationalism growing around the world, but also there was a whole passage, there was a whole section to do with one of the characters, Sunny's closest friend, who is a doctor in rural America, in small, very rural landscape. And that really intrigues me, because my brother-in-law actually worked as a doctor in rural Kentucky. But I've also I've seen other sort of these doctors who live so far away, sort of 5 or 6 hours drive away from an urban center, and they're the only Indian, the only foreigner in town in these very small landscapes. And I think their experiences are really, really extraordinary.
Well, you've read the Abraham Verghese.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, that's an amazing
book. That's an amazing book about AIDS.
Yes, in my own country.
In our country, right.
Well, this has been beyond
This is
lovely.
so lovely. Thank you, Anne, for
Thank
everything
you,
you've done
Kiran.
for this book. I can't believe how lucky I am that
I
it came to you.
just love it so much. And I'm so glad that you were here all day and signed those thousands of books.
Yeah, me too.
It was so
just love it.
abusive. We're
Thank
so
you.
grateful. Thank you.